Well, I'm very scientific. Um, before I went, Before I entered into the world of business and finance, I was originally going to do physics as a major. My aspiration was to become a theoretician, a theoretical physicist, basically, in the field of science. So I was brought up very scientific, very scientific. And if it didn't follow the scientific method, I would refuse to ever hear of it. If the scientific method refined it as something that cannot happen, surely cannot happen, scientifically impossible, then I refuse to know about it. I would not waste brain cells trying to wrap my mind around something that's pseudo scientific. Um, UFOs initially was part of that type of thinking. I kind of put it to the side, didn't really think of it to be really true. It's funny because it wasn't until when I decided to change my major and went into business and finance that question did come into my mind a few times. I'm not gonna lie, and I really thought about it, and I realized when I program myself to disregard UFOs and aliens as something that just cannot happen in terms of them here on this planet, like little green men or little gray, gray alien beings. I thought about that topic a whole lot, and I didn't think about all the eyewitness sightings, the historical um, record of other beings that fits the descriptions of gray aliens and reptilian beings, um, and just the whole host of whistleblowers that used to work for the government that confirm that many of these stories are true, that they are indeed here, that our government is working with them, that have mysteriously passed away under mysterious circumstances. And trust me in this, I've done my research. Phil Schneider is probably the best resource to go to for confirmation on these certain matters. He was a government geologist, structural engineer, um, and scientist. He worked for the government for about 17 years. He had one of the highest security clearances that one can get in the entire world. I think only 5 people worldwide are given access to this particular clearance, or earned, I should say, this particular clearance. He worked at underground military bases. He constructed a series of underground tube shuttles, um, which is a whole different story on its own, to kind of detach from what we're talking about currently today. And he told the world after the death of his friend, because his friend Ron Rummel was also a government contractor. He was writing a book about all the alien beings that our government was working with and that they had cataloged. He was found dead in the park under mysterious circumstances. They ruled it to be suicide, but he had a good paying job after he quit the military, of course, and quit the contracting business. He had a family. He had maybe a 7-year-old son, a beautiful wife. The whole world was going for him, you know. But somehow he committed suicide, quote unquote. And so, of course, Phil Schneider was touched by this, and he knew who was responsible for his death. And that really was a tipping point. And that's when he started really exposing this information. And then he was found dead in his hotel. I think it was in his apartment room with some type of surgical tubing wrapped around his neck several times. And he was apparently strangled to death. And then he was, I think, badly beaten too. Afterwards, they're assuming after he was strangled, or he was beaten and then strangled, but it showed that he was first strangled and then beaten to death to make sure. Um, but he passed away under mysterious circumstances. And the way that, and how he passed away, you couldn't just do it by yourself. And they determined that there had to be at least 2 people that were there with him during the time of his passing. So all this information that I've come across after I became what they call they're called, let's see, what do they call them? They call them pharisaical scientists. Like the Pharisees back in the Bible times. So if you're a Christian here, because I'm a Christian, so but it's kind of well known, even if you're an atheist. But Pharisees are very strict people who only follow just 5 guidelines, say, and they didn't deviate from that. So they would follow these guidelines to the nail, right? I was that type of scientist. I followed science literally step by step and was not open-minded. And so I just started to kind of ponder this information a little bit more, and so I came down to my own conclusion. And I thought to myself, there could be a possibility that aliens do exist on this planet. If I were to give it a percentage, I would say there's a 75% chance that everything that's been collected over the years in terms of information, sightings, eyewitness accounts, all that, 75% chance that this phenomenon is very real. And the other 25% accounts for hoaxes, misidentification, etc., and even this tiny fraction of IO concern, or perhaps consideration that this is not an actual phenomenon. But that will make up maybe 1%. So really, it would be 1/24/75. 1% chance that this stuff could not be true, very minuscule. 24% chance that, yeah, this is very true. However, it could just be more or less just misidentification, hoaxes, etc. But then 75% chance that, okay, this is very real. This needs to be considered. And so that's my viewpoint on this particular subject. That's the best viewpoint. My best answer to your question is, there's a huge chance that there's something going on. There is obviously something going on the government side. They know something that we don't. And I'm going to make that clear. They know a lot of things that we don't. They have access to technologies. They have access to intelligence, information. They have access to more things than we do, and that's obvious. Are they really for us? We don't know. One of the executives of Lockheed, and I'm going to paraphrase, said that the government has a lot of technologies that it would take an act of God to disclose them to the general public, because they're buried under black programs. And many of you that are familiar with Air Force aircrafts and how the Air Force, and not just the Air Force in particular, but the military in general, how they classify programs and how well their advanced aircraft has gone just over the past 100 years, it's very astonishing. And then there's obviously a little bit more to the cake than the icing. There's something in the middle that is kind of a bit more sweeter than the icing itself. I mean, how many of you had an ice cream cake before? It'll be icing on the top and usually be chocolate on would be the next layer, or the actual cake itself, and in the very middle will be ice cream, which is better than the entire cake itself, right? And so that's how that's how the government is. We're not allowed to cut the cake, let's say, but we know it's ice cream, or we think it's ice cream, but we're never gonna know until we cut the cake open. But we're not allowed to, so we can only assume. So all the information that we get from the government that we think is good, the icing, the chocolate, it may just be the surface, and what we really want is the ice cream itself, right? And that's inside the cake. But we can't know if it's inside the cake because we can't cut it. We can't cut the government in half. We can't even go in there if you wanted to. Not even the president could. And there are toll protocols. I want to say, if they're asked the same question you, my good friend, just asked me. So that's the best answer that I can give to that question. I think it's essential that the world should know what's really going on in this world. I will tell you this right now, from my own perspective, the world is definitely not what it seems. I'm just riding the wave, okay? And I have to watch what I do, even, because I have people above me that it would not be beneficial for me to expound more on this topic as well as other things. Much like how Buffett, he can easily crash the market if he wanted to. Karl Icahn, Bill Ackman, all these hedge fund managers, even Bill Gates could. These people George Soros. Don't get me started, okay? For all these individuals, by word of mouth, they could easily crash the economy. Just by saying words, they can crash the economy. Very likewise with myself and other individuals, especially those in the scientific realm. Okay, but again, we live on this planet. We're at the mercy of the people that control it. So let's just leave it at that and keep it at that. Okay, that's all I'll say.